Hi everyone, this is the video update to the budget that was declared today. So what I've done basically is to look at the entire budget. I listened to the finance minister when she was talking, and I've kind of looked at the fine print of things and tried to associate that with some of the sectors and companies that can benefit today. There's a lot of talk on income tax and a lot of talk about on the internet and groups and everywhere else. But a lot of people are missing on the changes in custom duties, and there are some big winners in those. So we'll talk about all of that. And with that, let's get started. So the theme of the budget had like four or five themes. First was around employment. So India's unemployment rate is pretty high, especially in the youth sector. So the government is certainly trying to push and ease and create some of the jobs environment there. And the way they are doing it is basically giving out first-time employment benefits. So whoever joins as a new employee or starts his or her career, they get basically 15,000 rupees as a think of it like government joining bonus. So government gives you like 15,000 rupees whenever you start your first job. Then the government has also put out easy education loans, NPS salary deduction from pension scheme has increased from 10% to 14%. There's an internship scheme now where government gives you 5,000 every month for 12 months for whoever employs interns to the top 100 companies. Um, you have institutes that the government is establishing, also known as ITIs, and there's a lot of employment-linked incentives for the manufacturing sector jobs. And that brings me to the second priority of the budget, which was clearly on manufacturing. So while last few, and it used to be like a norm that India's budget is more inclined towards agriculture sector, but it's kind of heartening to see that government has also started focusing on manufacturing, which is basically where we need to improve and kind of keep the ball rolling. So some of the uh, important announcements were made around like for medium scale and small scale manufacturing enterprises, credit guarantee scheme, credit support, rental housing for industrial workers. All of that is basically included in it. Um, so I won't go into a lot of detail into things that are not related to the market. I'm just kind of giving you a flavor of what the budget was about. Um, and in the next slide, we will kind of go through into companies and uh, sectors that benefit from the budget. So, third important theme was around agriculture and agri products, and there was a lot of, I think, 1.25 lakh crore incentives around here. So, a lot of support to agriculture sector and agri products, and we'll talk about a lot of custom duties that has been basically removed on imports, and a lot of incentives in the aquaculture as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. Fourth is rationalization of taxes. So there was this fear on capital gains, taxes being increased. And while that has happened, from 10% long term, we have gone to 12.5, and short term from 15, we have gone to 20. There's also a bit of rationalization, at least the first step towards rationalization of taxes that we are moving towards. So, tax code in India has always been pretty, uh, uh, what do I call it? Like it's been basically just bad, plain bad. I don't want to abuse it, but it's basically messy, it's bad, and it doesn't make much sense because, for example, on debt and housing, which are also assets, capital gains were treated very separately on those. Financial assets were treated separately. There was a different tax code for financial assets, different for capital gains on other types of assets. So all of that is kind of trying to move towards some sort of a rationalization with a clear indication that the personal income tax code in the next 6 months will go through further rationalization, and Finance Minister was clear on that. So in the next budget, we will hear a lot more rationalization on taxes. And I don't know what direction they take into picture, but at least what they have taken today is basically a rationalization of they're basically divided into same income tax code for financial assets as well as non-financial assets. And we'll talk about a little bit on that. The other theme was Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, lots and lots of incentives there. And this was pretty much obvious. And there is a coalition government. Parties from these two states are holding the coalition, so they are getting benefits. Bihar is a lot of incentives in terms of tourism and other kinds of incentives. Andhra Pradesh got 15,000 crores for a new capital that they will make, so it was expected there. Then the last theme was energy. So we talked there were incentives around nuclear, thermal, pumped hydro, and Indian carbon markets, and obviously solar and renewable was part of it. So these 6, 7 points were pretty much the major highlight. There was obviously other stuff around wherever there's flooding and damage due to flooding, there were incentives to rebuild and all of that, which is pretty much the norm. So I'm not going to go into details of those. But at a very high level, important stuff was pretty much these 6 points. Um, Coming to what industries benefit. So there's a long list of custom duty being changed in the budget itself. And it's surprising to me, not a lot of people on social media and even our group or anywhere else are talking really about it. Everybody's focused on that 2.5% increase on long-term capital gains, but you're missing out on some of the opportunities that are clearly laid out in the budget for you. So let's go some of those. So the first big winner was aquaculture, and this was also a little bit expected because Andhra Pradesh is one of the aquaculture hubs in India. And Andhra Pradesh government is obviously part of the coalition. So you got a lot of, and government also, even the BJP government has always been, even before this election, they were always highlighting how they want to increase aquaculture, especially the exports and cultivation of aquaculture in India. So a lot of incentives here. So first, I would basically group them into three buckets. First is basically decrease in duty on fish feeds. So fish and shrimp feeds is basically what you feed to grow shrimps. Very simple. So a lot of inputs goes into this fish feed and a lot of imports. Any of those imports, basically of that nature, is the duty on those is now down to zero. So no uh, imports, no restrictions, and no duties. You can basically do cheap imports of fish feeds. So one of the companies that will get impacted, and so any aquaculture company should do well. And we have like a couple of companies. We have Coastal Corporation, Avanti Feeds, Apex Frozen Foods, Waterbase, Kings Infra. These five companies are pretty much the bulk of aquaculture industry in India. So I believe these all should do well, especially because of the third part as well, where we have basically reduced the duty, and it's I think now 2.5% duty, very minimal duty on the brood stock for Venamai shrimps and black tiger shrimps. These are basically species of shrimps that grow very well in India. So brood stock is basically the stock that you kind of import to cultivate and breed and make more shrimps. So all of that is pretty much very cheap to import now. I think it's reduced from 10% now to 2.5%. So these are aquaculture is definitely one of the big winners from this budget uh, in terms of reduction of duties and uh, exports because if we our inputs are basically less costly now, we can compete well on an export market. So hopefully this will lead to a lot more exports. Companies to look at and study here are basically Coastal Corporation, Kings Infra, um, Apex Frozen is also more into retailing of goods, but Apex Frozen, um, Avanti Feeds, these are pretty much the companies we can look at. The second big one is solar glass manufacturing. Um, So they have reinstated 10% custom duties on solar glass imports, which is basically the previous custom duty that was there for Borosil Renewable in 2022 when it did really huge jump in profits and margins. So this is a big, big win for Borosil Renewable um, because they have been kind of asking for it ever since I think 18 months now, almost 2 years. So this kind of will help Borosil Renewable, especially now because they have higher capacity and the stock is also beaten down. It's going through consolidation for a very long time. Um, so should really help in bringing that margins back and helping most of the demand from imports uh, to go to Borosil instead of importing China's glass. Most of it should go to Borosil now because suddenly Borosil's product is 10% cheaper. So why wouldn't it go to? Now, the third big one is gold and precious metals. So there's a lot of reduction in duty in imports of gold, silver, platinum, any other precious metals. And what this impacts is basically all your gold and jewelry retailers. So Senco Golds, Titan, any other. There's a bunch of them now. So all of them should benefit. And this should lead to higher purchase of gold because suddenly gold is cheaper in India because of this reduction in custom duty which should definitely lead to higher sales. So gold and jewelry retailers are your ones to look at. And if you want to kind of quickly see which ones are there, so what I'll do is basically let me uh, also look out and give you all of these companies so that you can kind of easily see. So these are the 34 jewelry related companies from a market map tool. And you can kind of see all of those here. I can look at, for example, let me ignore all the, let me only look at greater than 1,000 crores one. So these are all the one. Titan, Kalyan Jewelers, Senco, Tangamalai. So all of these should probably do better with this. And some of these companies, for example, PC Jeweler is undergoing a turnaround. Obviously, promoter question mark still there, but it's going through a lot of reduction in debt, a lot of one-time settlements. That raising 2,700 crores, all of that combined with what today's budget trigger is should kind of do well for the company. So gold and precious metals are clearly another sector that benefits. Um, Textile and footwear, there was very specific on textile and footwear, which was basically materials required to manufacture leather and synthetic leather goods. So any of those within the footwear and textile, the inputs required to manufacture it should are cheaper because there's no duty on them anymore now. Shipbuilding. So there's no duty now on components required to make ships, and these are both types of ships, your warships as well as your commercial ships. Plus, there's 23,800 crores worth of outlay from the government towards building a naval fleet. These are clearly warships. So another 23,800 crores worth of orders should flow to shipbuilding companies, plus whatever material they were importing, which was not available in India. The duties on that material is basically gone now. So that becomes cheaper for them. So all of this combined should help in the margins. Two other important ones, ammonium nitrate. Duty here has been increased from 7.5 to 10%. So importing ammonium nitrate is going to become more expensive, which should help in the local manufacturers of ammonium nitrites. Then PVC flex films and PV flex banners. So the imports of these has been considerably increased from 10% to 25%. So all the local manufacturers, and mostly these are packaging companies like Polyplex, Uflex, Cosmo Films, all of those guys, those should benefit as well because local manufacturing will become easier. But packaging will always kind of cheaper in India. So it remains to be seen how much that will impact. But other than that, very good. Like three, four major winners are basically aquaculture, solar glass manufacturers, uh, gold and precious retailers, shipbuilding. So these are the four companies which are benefiting just from change in custom duties around them. Other winners, which are not related to custom duty but other parts of budget, help them. So first is nuclear. Bharat small reactors is basically a term for small nuclear reactors that the government is trying to establish in a very standardized fashion. So they have not announced how much outlay will go towards that, but they've clearly announced that they're going to set up small reactors. So expect increase in number of nuclear orders to companies, and there are very few companies that get these orders. BHEL, NTPC, Sealmatic, Powermac, KSB, Denora, these are the companies that will benefit from. And why do I say that these companies will benefit is because if you go to our RAP filings tool and only filter for nuclear keyword under announcements, you will see some of these companies have already started winning orders. So KSB won a 55 crore order, BHEL is going to set up nuclear plants in India, Powermac recently won an order for 563 crores. Denora won an order for 38 crores. So these companies are clearly benefiting from it and should continue to benefit. Sealmatic is another big one that should benefit because it's not like not every valve company is certified for nuclear plants. Sealmatic is the one that is. Space industry. There's a upcoming startups within space. There's a lot of Pixel is another one. There's a lot of recently one startup, Agnikul or something, went launched their small rocket launch as well. So government wants to keep that industry going. So there's 1,000 crore venture capital fund. Uh, Established by the government to be invested into these startups. And there's not a lot of them, so all of them should kind of basically get incentives and money from the government to grow. Third big sector that is going to benefit really well is the digitization of maps kind of industry. And there are few companies here. There are basically what's happening is there are two parts, rural and urban. So on the urban side, the land records in all the urban areas will be digitized via GIS mapping, right? Then on the rural side, there are three, four things. First is government is going to establish a land registry, link that land registry with farmer registry so they clearly know which farmers owns how much land, and they will digitize cadastral maps. Some of the companies, and I got this from our market map tool, Genesis International, Senesis Tech, Riding Consulting Engineers, Dronacharya Aerial, Cadasys India, and MapMy India. These are six or seven companies that are basically into this. The biggest winner would be should be Genesis International because they have been doing it. But some of the other ones like Cadis India, Synesis, and smaller ones like Riding Consulting, they also should benefit. So worthy companies to study about, and we will kind of talk about these and go deep dive into our weekly calls as well. The other big sector is carbon markets. And again, not nobody's talking about it. I don't really know why. It's basically government has clearly announced in the budget that for heavy industries, which are basically steel, aluminum, metal manufacturing, mining, any of those where there's a lot of carbon requirement, those industries right now have emission targets, efficiency targets, basically. That, for example, in manufacturing in steel, I need to use electric arc furnace. I cannot use the age-old technique of putting iron and producing so much smoke and emissions, and then making steel. I need to use the more efficient way of doing it, which is electric arc furnace. Now, what usually happens in EU and other developed countries is basically the government announces that for steel industry, there's the emission limit of, let's say, 100 for that year. So together the entire steel industry can only emit 100 carbon units. And I'm just making that 100 up. It will obviously be more, but for the ease of example, I'm making 100. Now, from that 100, the government will next year reduce it down to 80, then next year reduce it down to 70, then reduce it down to 50. And if the and the way the government incentivizes that if you meet it, you get carbon credits, and whoever doesn't meet it, their threshold, they have to purchase carbon credits. So you become an efficient market of carbon credits in the uh, country, and that's how EU carbon markets function. So government is going to move for hard to abate or heavy industries from efficiency targets to emission targets. Very similar approach to what EU follows and US follows, right? This should lead to a thriving carbon market in India on the lines of EU carbon market. So far, there's not a lot of carbon markets, very voluntary, but this will be a big trigger on putting because there's involuntary and government funded carbon market now. And one of the biggest companies to benefit from it is Indian Energy Exchange because they already have a carbon exchange up and running. And that's called basically a CBAM model. If you want to learn more about carbon markets, we have a free deep dive that I have written a while ago, and I'll just show you where it is. So basically, you can read this article on my website, free blog, which is Invest Karo India. Uh, this is the path to it. If you go here, if you just search Invest Karo India carbon markets, carbon credits, you will get that as well. So it tells you a lot in detail how carbon markets started, what I'm talking about on carbon ecosystem, what do you mean by these emission related targets and all of that. Right. So you can go look at this and what the carbon markets are kind of doing in India as well. But a big trigger, and one of the companies is Indian Energy Exchange. There's also another company called EKI Energy, but EKI Energy doesn't really, it helps in certifying carbon projects and trading and selling of carbon credits rather than building it. There's also some accounting and all of that issues there. So question marks around that area. So, but Indian Energy Exchange is clearly a big beneficiary uh, when this kind of takes its full form. Another sector is housing. So PM Awas Urban Yojana, 10 lakh crore outlay, plus interest subsidies on loans. Housing finance companies, affording housing developers, all of those should benefit very well. Um, then we have water supply and treatment. So the government is going to create 100 mega scale water treatment projects in 100 large cities in India. So obviously all the water treatment infra companies, there are a lot of them these days. There's EMS, there's Josh, there's Ion Exchange, a lot of them. So it should do well. Finally, you have automobiles and auto component sector, and there are two parts to it. First is e-buses. Central government is going to spend 1,300 crores on procurement and establishment of e-buses for I don't know if they will give it to states or they will use it for central government purposes or whatever the case is. But basically, they are going to spend 1,300 crores, and this 1,300 crores is an increase from 20 crores, which was in the previous budget or the interim budget. So really big jump here. And then you also have a PLI scheme for auto components and automobiles up to the tune of 3,500 crores. So both should do well. Not huge sums of money, but still decent enough here. And definitely e-buses steals the limelight in this area, right? Finally, you have renewable energy, solar, and everything else. Interesting part here is the pumped hydro part. And if you want to learn about pumped hydro, you can go through the renewable energy webinar under the courses section. There's a very detailed slide and I think 15-20 minute talk on what pumped hydro is, how that functions. So basically on the website under courses, if you go to value chain, you will find green energy webinar here. Just go through it under the solar sector. You will find pumped hydro available there. So, but pumped hydro is basically a way to store energy, and it comes under battery energy storage. It's a type of battery uh, which is nothing to do with lithium and traditional battery. Basically, in a very simple words, if you have a hill somewhere and you have water, let's say a river or a pond below the hill, what you will do is basically use the energy generated by solar to run the pump to move this water from down anywhere down location to the top of the hill, right? And that way you're storing energy in natural form, because when you need the energy, what I'm going to do is basically just rush the water down from the top of the hill to wherever down it needs to go. And because of that kinetic energy, um, I can spin a turbine and regenerate that energy. So it's a way to store energy, and pumped hydro is one of the big ones that comes under. So a lot of incentives and a lot of focus from the government in this area. So interesting part. Then you have removal on duty on several parts that were being imported to manufacture cells and modules. So manufacturing of cells and modules is already a protected area where uh, the entire modules we are not letting people import, and we are also requiring that domestic projects have some percentage of domestic cells under it. Now the government is making it even easier where um, on the import of parts required to manufacture, I don't need to pay duty on it. From 7.5% it's gone to nil. So it becomes much easier. It's cheaper for me to manufacture now as well, because 7.5% cheaper should be, and then it becomes more competitive. So definitely a lot of attention towards cells and modules, and that also lets me to believe that government is not going to remove these duties and just give up on cells and modules anytime soon, right? Finally, Surya Ghar Yojana, 6 to 5,000. This is basically a solar rooftop program by the PM. So 6 to 50 crores worth of outlay there, right? Um, this is basically a summary of everything from the previous budget to this budget. So housing has a big bump. E-bus, like I told you, has a big bump. Interlinking of rivers has a big bump. And this can also be kind of a trajectory towards inland waterways. Again, if you want to learn about inland waterways, let's go to courses and the shipping industry. We have a detail there. The naval fleet I talked about. Semiconductors has a very big bump. PLI scheme I talked about. Solar power grid has a very big bump. And railways has some increment as well. Now, so these were the sectors, and the sectors that you should focus on from the perspective of the budget. Shipbuilding, aquaculture, solar glass, gold and retailers, your nuclear industry, digitization, carbon markets, housing finance, water supply. These are like 6 or 7 sectors already. And some of these have like one or two companies under it. Like digitization on maps has like 4 or 5 companies under it. Aquaculture has like 5 companies under it. Solar glass has like one company under it. There are other smaller manufacturers of solar glass, but the listed one, pure play solar glass manufacturer, is only one out there. Gold retailers has like 4 or 5 big ones, and then you have very tiny ones as well. So pretty easy to figure out where the impact will be and how soon the impact will be, right? Finally, I'll close it out with some taxes part. I've simplified it simply. Basically, short-term tax increase to 20% from the current 15%. Long term is 12.5% now, increase from 10% for financial assets, right? And the holding period on financial assets, which is basically stocks and everything else, is 12 months to classify as a long term. Then for non-financial assets, which is real estate and everything else, it's decreased to 12.5% from 20%. So it's great, but the caveat is indexation benefits have been taken away. So there's no indexation anymore. Then you have tax relief increased from 1 lakh to 1.25 lakhs. And on options and futures, STT options from 0.1% has increased to 0.1% from 0.0625. And on futures, it increased to 0.02 from current 0.0125. Uh, Buybacks will now be taxed at similar thing as dividends. So a direct impact will be on number of buybacks being announced. And this was a loophole basically where instead of giving a cash dividend, the company would give you a buyback because it was tax efficient. Now that loophole has been dissolved. It's similar whether you want to give a cash dividend or whether you want to do a buyback. So at personal tax slab rates, it will kind of do it. Finally, on personal income taxes, standard deduction increased to 75,000 from 50,000. And you have basically different in slabs now. So up to 3 lakhs nil, 3 to 7, 5, 7 to 10, 10, 10 to 12, 15, 12 to 15, 20, and above 15 is 30. So clearly a focus towards uh, getting more people to sign up for the new regime so they can take off all the ATC and ATD and all the Section 80 benefits from the plan, because in new regime you don't get any of those deductions, right? You only get one deduction, which is standard deduction, and you have to play at a slab rate. So clearly more and more incentives, and I believe um, we don't I shouldn't like we shouldn't expect any increase in 80 C, because clearly the government focus is to get rid of the old tax regime and get more and more people to a simplified tax structure under the new regime. So they will kind of allow you to get more and more. So that's why the slab is also increased. I think with this new one, most people will move it, whoever was on the verge as well. Um, this is the basically comparison of how much you tax pay versus the new and the old regime here under the LTCG. So if you were paying, let's say your LTCG was 5 lakh rupees, uh, now you're paying 4.53. Earlier you were paying 4.6. So actually, it's reduced, right? Because you're getting more benefit. Similarly, on the higher side, if you were paying 30 lakhs LTCG, now you're paying 3.59 under as taxes as of previous 2.9. So obviously, and sorry, in this one also the taxes increase, but the impact of increase in taxes is between 1.5 to 2.5%, from 5 lakh in LTCG a year to 30 lakh in LTCG in clear. And obviously, if you have crores and crores in LTCG, you will have more impact. Um, but it's not drastic impact like 30-40%. It's still in single digits, even at a higher level. And this is a chart just to show the indexation. So let's say earlier you bought a property for 10 lakh rupees. If when you were getting indexation, you basically were paying and you sold that property for 1 crore rupees after, let's say, whatever, 10 years. The tax that you were paying at indexation was 13 lakh something something. Now without indexation, you're paying 11 lakh 25,000. So it's still cheaper for in some cases, but again the difference is not that huge. So it's not like real estate will go for a toss, or indexation was saving the day and whatnot. It's still okay, because from 20% you're now paying to 12.5%. And finally, the last part, all of this was good for us. And the other part on the macro level is basically the fiscal deficit is on a downward trajectory, which is great. We need to go somewhere below 3.5. That's where US and everybody is. So from 9% during the COVID, it's now down back to 4.9%, and hopefully it will be down to around 3%, 3.5%, which it was on the best of times. Um, So that was the budget. I have summarized sectors, given you examples on taxes, and looked at a macro part, which is fiscal deficit. But most important part are the sectors. So go through those. I will put this um, PDF in the group as well, or somewhere wherever you're watching the video. There will be a link in the description if it's on YouTube. But yeah, and use the tools. You will find a lot of stuff. Go through the carbon credit doc one. I'll also link this. Go through courses on R to understand pumped hydro and all of that, and use the tools to find companies, market map, as well as draft filings to find companies in these sectors, other than the ones that I mentioned. Um, so that was the budget for you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you this week in our Wrap weekly call. Goodbye.